Clint Bodungen. He's a dungeon kind of guy. Dungeons and Dragons too. I probably done that too. Uh, he's with a company. He's a founder and CEO of ThreatGen, and we're going to talk about application, Gen AI, LLMs, good, bad, and ugly, and how to maybe some strategy on integrating them.
It just is. There's no good, bad, or ugly. It just is.
It's going to be entertaining. I don't know if you're going to learn anything, but it's going to be entertaining. Clint, it's all yours, man.
Y'all are in a splash zone. Right. AI. All right. I didn't plan to do this. I want to try this out. Hold on. It's like, I'm doing a presentation. Wait, can you hear me? Can you hear me? No, not y'all. Hold on. Hello? 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 Wait. Hold on. I'm doing this for you. And I should not be doing this because I got a bunch of slides to get through and I probably overcommitted myself, but we're going to try this out. Hello, can you hear me? Oh, my, yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right.
How can I help you further?
All right, we're going to try this out. All right. I'm doing a presentation on real-world cybersecurity applications with generative AI and LLMs.
Sounds good. What would you like to try?
Well, you can stop interrupting me to start. But can you go ahead and just do my presentation for me? Go ahead.
Got it? I'll follow your lead. What's the topic of the presentation, and how would you like it structured?
Real-world cybersecurity applications with generative AI and LLMs. Just go ahead and start. It's not the advanced voice.
All right, let's dive in.
No. All right. I was trying to experiment with so OpenAI just released the advanced voice, and it's really just really dynamic, and the voice, when there's a voice tones or anything like that, and sounds like a real human. They can do different accents and stuff. I was just trying to test it out. It ain't working. All right, I'm gonna put my phone up since I was instructed to put my phone up. All right, let's get this moving. So, first of all, thank you for attending, and I want to let everybody know that I obviously cannot teach you everything, or even very much, in 45 minutes. So what we have here is I'm going to kind of give you a high overview and tidbits and tricks and tips as we go through on how you can effectively use generative AI for production or building apps, even privately, and everything else, all the other topics, all the other content that I can't provide here is available for free. So the first one is if you go to cybersuperhuman.ai, click purchase, but use that code right there. It's free copy of my book, free copy of the course or whatever. By the way, I did this at my book signing, and they DOSed the server. So just wait if it's all taken down. Also, all the source code that we cover here, and I know that some of you are not coders, and code scares you. It scares me, and I am a coder. So feel free to go ahead and gloss over the parts where I start talking about code, but those of you that are coders, I can't cover it in detail, so you can get all the source code at these two GitHub repositories, right? And so, let's get started. So the truth about generative AI, there's a lot of myths out there, there's a lot of hopes and dreams, but the first thing you know right now is, and I think we all know this, right? AI is not going to be able to do everything for you. There's a lot of things it fails at greatly. I work with AI every single day, and let's be clear, both machine learning as well as generative AI, and trying to get this thing to do what I want it to do with code is like trying to get a 3-year-old to do what you want it to do. And I think sometimes it argues with me on purpose, but it's getting better. But it still can't do everything. And you can rely on it to give you accurate information if done right. You can, we won't start an argument here earlier, can we actually have data that's not shared, and can we actually run LLMs that we don't risk our data privacy and all that stuff like that? Yes, you can. We'll talk about that. And you can use it safely in production. Now, I would not rely on it to make decisions in like OT environments or anything like that. But there are certain areas. When I say production, I'm not talking about it running your distillers and crackers. I'm talking about production as in business production environment and things like that. So this is possible. And you can avoid hallucinations with using techniques that we'll talk about, retrieval augmented generation and agent systems and things like that. And also, don't do drugs to help you avoid hallucinations. Talking to you, Mike. All right. All right, so let's talk about a couple simple use cases. Now, I'm trying to interweave all of the different examples and tips and techniques with different use cases. And this is gonna be, this hurts my eyes. This sucks, right? Just take a picture of it, or this presentation will be available at those links that I provided you and whatever. It's a big presentation. I gotta take the videos out before it lets me upload it. But, so one of the best applications for generative AI and cybersecurity is training. You don't have to worry about the hallucinations in training, because when you're talking about creating tabletop scenarios or phishing scenarios, well, you're making it up, right? It is a hallucination. You want it to be creative and make things up. So that part's okay. And this big old huge prompt here is one that I use. And again, I'm not expecting you to read all this right now. Oh, did I? Oh, shoot. Sorry. I'm doing on my computer and not here. So, hey, all right, so there's the slide where I was telling you to use the code. This is one of the use cases where AI would have helped, right? All right, sorry. Thank you for pointing me out. You should have spoke up earlier and told me to shut up and keep talking. Yes. Yes, I'm going to post the slides there at one of those, both of those links actually. Yeah. You don't have to take pictures. Do not take a picture of me, trust me. All right, so there's that. And then that's what I was talking about. Anyway, see, I even said don't do drugs. All right. All right, here's this big old huge long prompt, right? So don't worry about that. But using techniques such as giving it a role, you are a cybersecurity expert, you're this, and giving it clear, precise instructions, I can actually have this thing. And this is when I say simple use cases, right? We're talking about the web UI. We're talking about using ChatGPT. We're talking about using Claude. We're also talking about use cases like training, where you're not worried about your private data, right? This is for training. And so we're going to use this effectively, and then get cool simulations. I'm not ambidextrous. All right, so you can get really cool simulations out of this to help train doing, phishing training. I know, my buddy James McQuiggan at KnowBe4 is going to hate me for doing this kind of stuff, but, this doesn't replace your quality enterprise level phishing simulations and stuff like that, but you can use these techniques to train entry-level employees. You can use this as an interim instead of doing the big, huge phishing training through KnowBe4 and stuff like that. So these are just cool little techniques, okay? This one is actually, I messed up the title. This should not say phishing simulation. This should say cybersecurity gamification, okay? So one of the things that we do to make training fun, and if you know me, I come from a company where we build games for cybersecurity, but I'm gonna put myself out of business and just kind of show you that you can do all this stuff yourself now with AI. And using prompts like this, where you're telling it to build a role-playing game and like find insider threat type of games, whodunit type of games, is another type of fun way to do cybersecurity training, to where you can produce, and this is hard to see, but again, like I said, take a picture of it, enlarge it, or go online and get the copies of the slides later. But it does a phenomenal job at building role-playing type games and doing these types of tasks, right? But these are simple tasks. These aren't serious use cases. These are just some of the use cases in cybersecurity where you can use the web UI and just kind of have fun with it. Here's a good one, and this is actually a little more serious. This one is really cool. So the other ones were kind of like, okay, phishing training, yay, and RPGs, yay. This one is useful because right now, tabletops are the hot topic. Everybody's trying to figure out a better way to do tabletops. Everybody's trying to figure out how to not spend time and money and resources building their scenarios. And this little simple prompt here is pretty cool. Now, instead of using ChatGPT, all right, we're going to have to work on our communication, okay? So if I just say, hey, just yell at me, throw something at me or whatever. So there's that prompt. Take a picture of it if you want to. Yeah, you got to remind me because I'm so used to being on my laptop and clicking here and it just changes here. And you guys, man, throw something at me, right? There's that. Man, I'm failing at this. At least I'm just so good looking. Why are you laughing? All right, I was serious. All right. Okay, there's the one I was talking about with the cybersecurity mission. I'm going to get like bad ratings on this talk because I wasn't showing you guys the slides. Don't bring that guy back. All right. And now we're, whoa. I don't know how that happened. All right, now we're back up to speed. All right, so for your tabletop scenarios, when you want to build your tabletop scenarios, who's heard of Perplexity? Yeah, a lot of people, good, probably about half the room. Perplexity is phenomenal because it can actually go out to the web and find real accurate data. And so here, we just told it, using the MITRE ATT&CK framework, create an IR tabletop exercise scenario, blah, 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 et cetera, using Volt Typhoon. And it actually, does that show? Yeah, little example here. So there's Perplexity in action. You can see it actually does, and it goes and gathers the data, and it thinks about it, and it compiles the data, and does the research. So it's actually going out to the internet and getting real data. Now, this isn't going to be the type of tabletop where you're using your real actual data, obviously, but we'll get to that point. Look, I got this thing going now. All right, so there's an example of it. Kind of gives you the scenario. Now, this is kind of short-worded. It's not going to be this huge, long exercise, but you can tell it to expand on sections. You can continue to chat with it and tell it to expand and add more information. There it gives you a bunch of injects. But think about it. I mean, who does tabletops? Anybody do tabletops or anything? Okay, again, more than half the room. And how long does it take to plan your tabletops? Right, it takes a long time, a lot of resources. So you can use, this is a perfect use case for generative AI if you're not concerned with actually using your data, your real details, right? But it comes up with great scenarios. And it's actually going out to things like MITRE ATT&CK and getting the real information from MITRE ATT&CK, building artifacts, building details, right? So even kind of, it gives you artifacts and gives you details. So if you're the facilitator, it's creating highly detailed information. It's creating the script for you. It's creating the injects for you. And you can do many of these over the, sit down for an hour, and now you've got like 50 scenarios you can do, or create however many as you want, and you can expand on them from there. It works even better if you give it a template to follow. Here's the format I want you to put in. This is exactly how I want you to give me the scenario, and then you can continue to tell it, iterate on it, and expand upon it. And in a matter of minutes, maybe an hour or two, you've got very detailed scenarios, injects, all this stuff, and it searched the web to actually get that information from like MITRE. Okay, so you have there it gives you some information on the CVEs that it used, or the vulnerabilities that it used, emails, it's a ransomware email, helps you build a scoring rubric on how to score the tabletop. So you can ask it for so much information and tell it to give you so much back, and it's just, this is one of the best use cases for that I've found. Okay, but let's talk about advanced use cases. Advanced use cases are going to be where you can't really use the web UI. This is where you're going to need to start tapping into the API and writing code and creating agents to really leverage the power of things. So let me go through this little video here. I'm going to go through, I hope I can do this. All right, how do I get the video started? Click it again. All right, so this was a snippet from S4 that I did. So right here we have an asset management system, and we're tapping into the asset management system, pulling in that data, and then using the generative AI to give us a threat analysis of the attack surface, different ways and vulnerabilities, the ways that vulnerabilities could be exploited. And so basically it's a sock in a box. We're taking a network diagram here, and we're using generative AI to make sense of the network diagram. And then I'll show you kind of how we did these in a minute. But it pulls out all the information, and we had to tell it this is a fictitious network because of the guardrails that kept telling us, I can't give you details on somebody's network, so I had to tell it and trick it. So, but it gives us a bunch of information. The reason we did this was because we wanted to be able to take network diagrams and extract the information very easily and quickly to include that into a tabletop exercise. Now, you don't want to do this publicly, right, if it's your own network data, so we'll talk about that. Okay, and then here's the example of the tabletop exercise where we're uploading different settings. We can upload incident response plans, we can upload playbooks, we can upload the network diagram, we can connect to asset management systems, and then it'll automatically generate, using generative AI, the entire scenario there instantly and facilitate it. So this is where you can continue to use the API and iterate, and it'll not only build the scenario for you, you can use generative AI to actually run the tabletop, to be the facilitator. Creating details on the fly, logs. And these are the kind of details, if you just want to create the scenario, a static scenario, you can get it to create that level of detailed logs for you by prompting it. Okay, I think that's it, good, all right. So, like I mentioned, obviously, these advanced use cases, web UI, chatbots like Claude, ChatGPT, they're pretty much useless because even when you're trying to do things like another big use case is document creation, right? Who's been tasked with creating their incident response plan? Cybersecurity policies and procedures, right? I know you have, Randy. But that is also a heavy lift. You can use generative AI to write the first draft of your incident response plans, your playbooks, your cybersecurity policies. But number one, if you try to do this in the chatbot online, Claude, ChatGPT, first of all, why shouldn't you do that? Because you're putting your personal data out there, your company's data out there. You don't want to do that. However, and then the second problem, beyond the security and the privacy, is if you've ever tried to get a chatbot, Claude, even with the high token count and memory, ChatGPT, and you try to get it to write a document of any length, it will give you maybe a page or two, right? It's not going to give you a lot of things. And then what do? You end up copying that and pasting it and saying, okay, using this, create the next one. Okay, continue. Okay, continue. And what a lot of people don't know is that even OpenAI, even though OpenAI has 128K context window, it does not in the chatbot UI. So it does run out of context memory pretty quickly. The API has 128K context memory. Now Claude, and I think Perplexity, they have like 200K out of the box in the chat window. But still, we don't want to use this publicly with our data, and we don't want to rely on that. So this is where the API comes in handy, to where you can start to use, and I'm just going to, I remembered. Again, using a prompt, this is just a system prompt that kind of tells it what we're looking for. We're going to create an IR plan. We're going to feed it this data and all this. Again, this is something that the entire code you can look at later. But it's a system prompt that essentially tells it exactly what we're looking for and exactly the data we're going to give it. So we're going to give it our network data. We're going to give it all our company data. Now, I'll show you in a bit how we're going to do this locally so you're not spitting all this data out to the cloud. Somebody's training off of it. But the important part is that this is the thing. So those of you that have built apps, trying to create documents and with the code, the key here is you're going to build your outline of whatever document you're trying to do. So whether it's policy procedures, whether it's an IR plan, build your outline first. And then you're going to feed that system prompt and then the initial instructions here to the LLM for each. That's what this for each statement is here for. So for each section that you have, you're going to feed it, you're going to tell it to go section by section to create the details, okay? Then you're going to save that into the content in the message history. So the way that the API works is that it's a series of user input, assistant output, user input, system output, and that composes a conversation. So every output that you get, you're going to save your input and its output into the entire conversation. And then what the technique is, your next prompt is actually not only going to contain your prompt, but it's going to contain a history of all the input and output that you had before. And it's going to retain that in memory. So number one, you're getting a better output by going section by section. That's a technique whether you're using ChatGPT or Claude. If you try to give it this big old long thing and say, okay, do something with this, it gets lost. But if you go section by section, telling it to generate a piece at a time, but feeding it the memory of everything you've done prior, it does a really good job. And so anytime you're building documents, and I've got the scripts I can give you for this, anytime you're generating documentation, this is the technique that you follow. This is even if you don't write code, but if you can type how to write a command in a command line, the CLI, this will work for you for any document. All you have to do is modify what you want, run it, and it'll spit it out. And the script even will spit it out in a Word document. It'll do it in text form. It'll spit it out in HTML. Create any document you want. Now, is this going to be your final document that you're going to hand to your CISO? No. Any CISOs in here? Okay, good. All right. All right. But it does the heavy lifting. So whether we're creating documentation, we're creating IR plans, we're creating tabletop scenarios, it's the initial drafts, the prep work, all that heavy lifting. That's where we're going to use generative AI with these techniques to take the heavy lifting off. Give us a first draft. It's like having a junior writer. It's like, when I wrote my book with ChatGPT, when I wrote my book on ChatGPT, it's like having a ghostwriter, right? So I know, how many people wondered if I used ChatGPT to write my book on ChatGPT? Yeah? Yeah, a few people. Yeah, we'll talk later. All right. Okay, so the example before where I showed how we were taking asset data from an asset manager and then making sense of it and, how to do a threat analysis on it using ChatGPT, not ChatGPT, using a generative AI. So generative AI is very effective at providing a very human-like analysis of data that it has. But how you give it that data matters, okay? In other words, if I took the entire JSON schema, the entire data output from an entire asset management system and all those assets, and I just tried to feed it into a 128K context window and said, okay, analyze this for me, it does a very poor job. So what you have to understand is that the AI will do the job that the human would normally do in the analysis portion, okay? Are you gonna go to your SOC analyst and say, here's 40 pages of asset data, I want you to give me an attack surface analysis? No, AI can't even really do that effectively. So understanding that the generative AI, the actual large language model, is just there to analyze the final output. The more information that you can pre-process in your data pipeline, the better. So I use a lot of Python code to grab the schemas, to pre-process the data, to build functions to do certain things with that data first. In other words, put it in bite-sized chunks, fit for purpose, right? Okay, so, all right, here's this asset. I'm going to get all the vulnerability data for that asset. I'm going to get the connectivity data for that asset. And I have those now stored in different places using Python or Pandas or whatever to pre-process that data and store it in fit-for-purpose bite-sized chunks. Then when you want to go ask the generative AI to do something with that data, you give it the pieces that it needs, and it's less data for it to process, okay? All right, I spent way too long talking about that. But what about data privacy, you say? Okay, we're going to do all this stuff with all our personal data, and all I've heard you talk about is ChatGPT and Claude and OpenAI API. How do we do this privately, air-gapped, without anything? So we're going to use local models, okay? and commonly found in a place called Hugging Face. We'll get to that. And there's two programs that I use for both prototype and for production apps called LM Studio and Ollama. Let's see, where are we at? Where are we at on time? I don't have a clock. Okay, perfect. All right, Stephen, you're my time. I would, huh? Yeah. All right. So give me the finger. Give me fingers and tell me. All right. So, well, that's an old story. All right. Sorry for my. Actually, I had an allergic reaction, and now my throat's all mucused up. So I know y'all wanted to hear that. So, local models. Anybody heard of Hugging Face? A few people. So when we're talking about using data models, LLMs, large language models for private use, right now, currently the best place to go find all those models, all thousands of them, is a place called Hugging Face. There we go. Okay, where were y'all? All right, so this is where you're gonna have a multitude of different models, and if you just do a little bit of Google searching or Perplexity searching, use Perplexity instead of Google for most searches now. It's awesome. It's a free version. So anyway, I'll show you more examples of it later, or maybe I won't. All right. So if you just do a little bit of searching, you can stay on top of what the most accurate, the best local models are. Like right now, we're looking at Llama 3.1 put out by Meta, and Zuckerberg did it himself. And it's got, big models and medium models and all that. And you just really kind of have to figure out what models work best for you, your hardware, and your use case. The general rule of thumb is the larger the model, the better it performs in terms of accuracy. The smaller the model, the better it performs in terms of speed, but it may be less accurate. So, and again, not enough time to go into all the details of how you would do this, but again, these are the highlights. So you can do this directly from LM Studio. It's an app you can download onto your Mac or your Linux box or your Windows box or your Commodore 64 most likely. But you can use this to download models. It connects directly to directly to Hugging Face. You can download the models directly. Okay, I'm on the same page. And prototype them directly using, it's got its own chat interface. It's got its own server, okay? The problem is, though, you have to have this GUI running, this graphical user interface running, so it's not good for building production apps, but it's fun to play around with. There it's got an example of, you can see it's got a server, so you can connect to it with it's its own API endpoint, so you can test different models to see how well they're gonna perform. Yeah, and so this one here, how many people write code for the OpenAI API? There's a few people. So what you'll find is that it gets easier to test these with your own API code if you're using a common syntax, right? So this can mimic OpenAI's API syntax, which is the most commonly used syntax for that. And so, no, that's it. Okay, yeah, don't give me that look. All right. So you can use it to mimic OpenAI's syntax, and then we'll move on. All right. Here's the little chat interface. Or you can just use the interface from LM Studio, load the model, and start chatting with it, like it's ChatGPT. Okay, so it's real quick and easy. However, if you want to build production apps, anybody build production apps using Ollama? Or any one person, right? I know it's you. You're the one. All right. So if you want to build your own applications using generative AI, using private local models, then you're going to use this tool called Ollama. It is meant for developers. It's built by developers for developers, and it is extremely fast, because what it does is it will allow you to download the model. You can have multitude of different models, and it downloads what's called the quantized version of the model. Quantized versions of the models are models that are optimized, for lack of a better explanation, optimized for use with smaller GPUs or for use on your CPU. Okay, so runs the models extremely fast, and it'll let you, just like LM Studio, set up an endpoint. So the next technique that is very useful for augmenting, that's why I got, it has augmented in the name. So augmenting the capabilities of the generative AI. So and I don't have a slide for this, but you kind of have 3 phases of model generation or improvement. Okay, you have the foundational training. These are the big models, like OpenAI's GPT models, or Claude's, or Anthropic's Claude, and Sonnet, okay? So that takes a lot of time, resources, money, and electricity to fine-tune the foundational models. That's why you hear about Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and Meta buying millions and millions of dollars worth of GPU arrays and stuff like that to be able to train these models, okay? We're not gonna have those capabilities. So we're left with 2 choices. We can use fine-tuning, okay, and that's not really part of what I'm talking about here. I'm not gonna cover that in this thing, but that's another course, or another talk. But you can fine-tune the models, or the easier way for most people is to use retrieval augmented generation. This is basically where you take documents, your IR plan, your policies and procedures, industry standards, and you take those documents, you feed it to the large language model, it vectorizes that. It turns it all into a bunch of numbers and maps that it uses to go search for this stuff. It puts it into a database, and now when you're chatting with your LLM and it needs to reference those documents, it can do it very effectively, very efficiently, and go and search for what you're looking for, and uses that as an augmented knowledge base. So an easy way to do this is by using a tool called Private GPT. In Private GPT, and who uses LM Studio? Does LM Studio also now have RAG in it? Okay. So yeah, just like you can use the LM Studio. I haven't used it there, so I didn't know. But you can use LM Studio probably then for RAG as well. But it's really simple. All you're doing here, even with the Private GPT, is you are giving it the documentation that you want to use. It's connecting to a local LLM using Ollama, or I guess also LM Studio, in order to chat with your documentation. You've probably all heard this, right? The whole chat with your documentation. Adobe, right? Adobe PDFs now has chat with your PDFs, chat with this, chat with that. So that's what this is doing, but it's doing it locally and privately. And then use cases for this, right? You can use this for the biggest use case for this that I have, and I'm building an app right now for somebody's consulting business to where they can take documentation that is taken from a gap analysis or a vulnerability assessment, pull those documents, and then you download the industry standards that you're using, 62443, 882, NIST, whatever, and then you can use it to analyze those documents. So you have all these documents in retrieval augmented generation, the RAG databases, and now you can chat with it and say, okay, here's this policy. Check this section against all of the different standards. Where am I compliant? Where am I gaps? So you can use this for compliance and gap analysis automation, and it's done privately using these models. Now, I will warn you, okay, again, like I said before, the smaller the model, the less accurate it's going to be. So you need to have some power, you need to have some server behind it, but if you want to do this as part of an actual practice, part of an actual service, then you're probably going to want to dedicate the resources to get yourself a beefy machine and a GPU array to do it. But you're keeping your data and your customers' data private while doing so. And that this is just an example that you can also use using Private GPT. It can be used like Ollama and with your own code, with your own API. This is probably one of the coolest takeaways here. If you didn't get anything out of this entire presentation and all you care about is how can I use generative AI in the easiest, quickest form privately without exposing any data, this is it right here. This is your slide. This is called Open Web UI. Open Web UI, okay, good, it's going. Open Web UI, it looks and feels just like ChatGPT or Claude. It runs 100% locally. It's even server-based and credential-based, so you can put it out on a server. And I've deployed this for customers in their businesses. You can put it out on a server. It has administration and authentication, where you can control user accounts. You can put guardrails in it. You can put your own documentation in there. It has, if you're using a multimodal model, you can upload images, whatever. And you can connect this to a server, and this is natively, when you install it, uses Ollama, so you can use whatever local model that you prefer. So this is how you would deploy, quote unquote, ChatGPT in your environment, to where you can do document analysis. And this is just this kind of combines everything we're talking about, right? You can use this to build your IR plan. You can use this to do your tabletop scenarios. You can use this to do your document analysis all locally. Okay, again though, if you're gonna do this for your organization. Now a lot of people are doing this in their organization. Oh, I don't want my company, I don't want my employees going out to the internet to go to ChatGPT, so they're deploying solutions like this. This is probably the coolest thing. Now, and this is, I'm just gonna talk very quickly about multi-agent functionality. So kind of going back to the iterating over the documents, you know, we're taking each section and doing it one at a time. That is kind of the beginnings of a basic agent-like functionality. And you'll hear people talk about agent systems and generative systems. What this means is that what agents are is there's two different versions of agents in generative AI. One, they're the versions that basically, they're just different functions in the code, and they each have their own system prompt. They each have their own specialization to do special tasks or tool calling to the API. And then another version of the agent is actual useful agents that use tools in a certain way to help you. So you have like personal assistants. So you can build an agent system that is designed to answer emails, help customer support. You can have agents that go out and analyze things. And so this is a much more advanced topic than for single talk, but I want to put this out there because this is a key functionality. If you're building production apps, if you're deploying this in your organization, and you want to get significant use, value, and accuracy out of your LLMs, you have to have agent functionality. And the reason why is because the most typical use of agents is where, and you can use things like LangChain, React agents, and again, probably going over a lot of people's heads, but to where agents will communicate with each other. This agent will go out to the internet and search for this, and then it says, okay, here's what I found. And it'll go to this agent will check it. Yep, looks good to me. Oh, except for you missed this thing. And they'll talk back and forth, okay? So there are things out there, which, not in the presentation, but there's things out there like Open Interpreter, which you can have on your computer, and it'll run in things on your computer, and it'll talk with you back and forth. There's all these different agent functionalities that do this. So if you are considering deploying this stuff seriously, or if you're considering using generative AI for building a production app, then you should be aware of agent functionality and generative use cases. So there's some simple ways to do that and practice with it. So one, well, okay, not the simplest, but is, I got them backwards. So LangChain, just beware, if you're writing code, use LangChain with caution. I don't always trust LangChain because they'll change stuff on you in the syntax and then everything blows up. But if you're doing it for research or if you're doing it for convenience, LangChain is the quickest way to use agent functionality and the tool usage and function calling and all that. But I don't trust it for production applications. But it's definitely something good to go look into. Then you have Microsoft has AutoGen. This is a way to create agents, specifically using the OpenAI and their API, and where you don't have to write code to create the agents, right? So it's okay, it's just something to look into if you want to start looking into agent workflows and things like that. And then there's another way, again, not going to get too deep into it, but because I said before, the first use case, which is essentially they're just different functions calling different LLMs with different system prompts, you can do a technique called function mapping, to where you're creating a different function for each different type of agent that you need. and then you're giving those functions, the LLM using those functions, information about what other functions to call. And so essentially what I'm saying is the LLMs can actually be intelligent about your code, and it can call functions from your code. So now you have these different agents that can act autonomously, but also know what functions in your code to call. So you're giving some intelligence to your application. So just another technique when developing applications on generative AI. Oh, see, you were I didn't need Steven. Go away. Yeah, with a certain finger. All right. Okay, and then this is the last thing I'm going to cover, since look at that, I got 5 minutes, actually less than that now. So remember when I told you if you don't take anything else from this conversation, or this talk, other than the open web UI thing, I lied. This is the coolest thing ever. So remember earlier, and I said, if you don't write code, don't worry about it. It's like, so if you don't write code, or if you've ever wanted to write code, or you think you need to understand code, or you think you need to leverage the power of the API because I told you to, but you don't write code, then this is what you need. It's called Cursor. Cursor leverages everything. It's a multi-agent system on the back end. Anybody use VS Code? Okay, a lot of people. I don't get it. Earlier I said, how many people write code? And like 2 people raise their hand. And I said to use VS Code, and about half the room or more raises their hand. This doesn't add up. Okay. Okay, no, I don't think about it. All right. So you have VS Code. Cursor. Okay, and who's used Copilot? VS Code Copilot. Okay. All right, a little less. So Cursor is a fork from VS Code, which is open source. It's a fork off VS Code, and it does a much better job. It's better than Copilot. Okay. What it does, it's a complete coding system. It has a composer mode that will let you completely do an entire full stack application, and all you have to do is prompt it and talk to it and tell it what to do. It writes it for you. I use this thing to create some applications that I would have never dreamed of that I could create, right? So, I'm talking like doing gene mutation simulations and stuff. I'm seriously, I was like, don't ask why I'm interested in that. But, and so, here's what I did. So using the composer in Cursor, this is all I said. Create a next.js web app that allows me to upload nestscan.csv files and then displays the analytics data in a dashboard widgets, dashboard style, okay? I put this slide together last night because I wanted to be able to show accurate dates and everything like that, okay? So that was the first prompt, okay? That's what it generated. It generated all the code on the left, generated all the code in the middle, and then there was some errors because it also tells me, oh, you have to install these modules. You have to use npx, and you have to install this. And it gives you step-by-step instructions on what to do in the command line and how to write the code. Then, oh, by the way, that was like 30 seconds. Then after about 5 minutes of doing the other things it told me to do, it wrote the entire code base that you see there on the left automatically. And then, by the way, like if it's doing this, and let's say you don't know how to code, and it gives you errors, you can actually click on the error and say, here, solve this for me. Go back and forth. It's literally point and click programming, letting the AI do the work. And then it generated the entire code base, no errors. It will, if you don't understand some of the code, what is this doing, what is this? And then you can actually learn. There was one slide I kind of glossed over where I said, AI won't make you an expert. Well, I mean, it can, because if you actually pay attention to what it's doing and try to figure out what it's doing instead of just letting it do all the work for you, then you learn. I learned how to do JavaScript or Node.js in about 2 weeks and become efficient. And here's the other thing I want to mention is that AI is not meant to replace you or do the job for you. It's meant to augment you. So if you learn what it's doing and you understand the code, understand the baseline, the two of you paired together are going to be better and more efficient. You can't let it do your job alone. So anyway, it did all this. I think this was about 5 minutes worth of work. It created this entire app in about 5 minutes. And it created the website, it spun up, it worked, and unfortunately, like I said, I did this last night. I didn't have a friggin' nessus.csv file to be able to do this. But I do know, because I understand the code, and I know that it's a very basic precursor. I did check to see if I can upload a file. I couldn't find a CSV file. I was going to call you at 2 a.m, Mike, and be like, dude, you got a Nessus CSV file? And like, but it did upload the file, and I uploaded a different file of another type, and it parsed it, but it was the wrong information. But it was 5 minutes worth of work, maybe 10 or 15 minutes worth of work. And I didn't write a single line of code or fix any bugs or anything. So those are the two things. If you want to deploy this application, if you want to deploy an application or deploy it in your organization, there's a lot of information here to start with and resources to go to. If you don't care about writing code and all you wanted to do is learn some really cool things to do with generative AI in your organization, stuff like that, open Web UI and Cursor. So feel free to reach out to me. LinkedIn, I like to talk about this stuff. I will talk about this stuff all day long. I'll help you out. That's it. Oh, there. That's how you get a hold of me.
Cool. Now, this is the legitimate end of the session. 15 minutes, there's another AI session in here. But if you have questions, you know what? He's here.
I'm going to sit right here.
We got 15 minutes to the next session. So, if you have questions, Mike, ask away. Do we mind step up to the microphone? We're video recording this, and allegedly at some point you'll be able to download the video.
Oh, this is better. I should have done the presentation from here.
So, what's your opinion on what I guess people would consider more gray hat models out there, like White Rabbit?
I love White Rabbit.
You do?
Yeah. So White Rabbit Neo, that model. Yeah. So here's what I would suggest. So I was actually using White Rabbit Neo for one of my applications, and I like the fact that it's uncensored and that it's fine-tuned with a really good cybersecurity base, even a Red Hat base or whatever. I would like to see more support for White Hat. And I wish the bloke would get a hold of that one and quantize it more. But look, the bottom line is, if it works, it works, right? I mean, keep the human in the loop to validate and verify that the information you're getting is correct. But there are tons of specialized models. There's coding models, right? There's White Rabbit Neo is awesome. No, it's good. I use it to do all sorts of little red team tools and stuff like that. So,
from a security perspective, how secure are the applications that you were kind of going over throughout the day?
wait, which ones? What?
The various different ones, like Open Web UI and all those others. How secure do you feel that they are as far as their usage?
Well, if you're using it in an air-gapped environment, or if you're using it on an isolated server, right? If you're doing it to keep from connecting to the internet, and because that's the idea, right? The idea is to use it privately, to where people aren't going out to the internet and leaking data into the clouds and stuff like that. Same thing, right? If someone tried to embed a C2 server or something like that in one of these, and it's not connected to the internet, well, then you shouldn't worry about it too much. I haven't seen or heard anything where somebody's doing like a reverse tunnel from it. Like, okay, I pop it on, it looks for an internet connection or anything like that. I haven't heard or seen anything like that. But with anything, number one, it's open source.
Isolated or air gap.
Yeah, but hey, look, number one, it's open source, so you can validate and verify the code base. Number two, I wouldn't deploy anything in my environment from some other source without checking it, sandbox it first, check for, go through the due diligence, but I haven't heard or seen anything about it. Open Web UI, I've been using it a lot and have deployed it several times, and there's been no security issues that I've found or seen. Now, that doesn't mean that, some nation state didn't do a really good job of embedding all this, or whatever, So I haven't done the full scale forensics analysis. No, Steven, you don't get a question. I'm not going to answer your question.
My name's Steven.
Oh, you're Steven too. Well, you know what? I prefer you than this guy.
So I do too. So there was I was in another talk, and they were talking about AI, and how that's all being put into all these big time companies, threat modeling and EDRs and MDRs and da 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 da. And one of the panelists brought up, how would you inventory that AI model that this company's using? And so is there a tool out there that would be sort of an AI vulnerability scanner?
Yes,
for
there
these
is.
AI vulnerability scanners.
Yeah, Luminova.
Luminova.
Yeah, so I'm actually testing Luminova right now. It's fantastic. It is probably the best. I should have put that in here. I didn't think about that. If you left, you missed out. Luminova is probably the best. It's professional quality, full-scale enterprise grade LLM risk management tool. It is fantastic. Yeah. In fact, I'll be talking about Luminova a little bit in my S4 presentation next year. I'm not paid by them. They're not a sponsor of this YouTube video. It's a great tool. It's complex. It's complicated, but it is amazing. No, it's professional grade. It's enterprise grade. Oh, but so you can also use LangServe. What's Lang? I think LangServe. Well, no, not just LangCraft, but there's a LangServe, I think. Anyway, but LangChain has a service that will also let you use LangChain libraries to where you can evaluate token usage, you can evaluate the prompts, you can evaluate all that. So I would say there's a free version of that, but it's cloud-based and all that. So I would say that's the other alternative.
For the example you showed at the beginning using Perplexity AI to build the simulation, were you modifying their default system prompt at all?
No, and I forgot to mention that you can modify. Yeah, you can always modify the system prompt of these tools that you're using. I did not modify it, but yeah, it should. Thank you, because it should be said. It should be noted that anytime you have a tool that has a base default system prompt, if you can modify it, modifying the system prompts will always. Okay, not always, because I never speak in absolutes, but will usually give you more optimized results, for lack of a better phrase. Stephen, you had a question, you said?
Yeah, so I haven't played with any self-hosted LLM stuff before, and I was wondering, obviously there's a huge spectrum of models available to download and program. What's kind of the size range for those?
Good question.
Are they,
Yeah.
is the big llama 10 terabytes or something?
Yeah, no. So a good test here. So the Llama 3.1 70B is about 40 gigs. Okay. Yeah, I know. I had somebody asking me this huge, these big old huge models. What does that have to go on? 1, 2 terabytes? No. The models themselves are not big, right? The 7B models, 7 billion parameter models, 4 gigs, 70. So you're looking at the 405 is about 120 gigs. I mean, so what's that? Yeah, on the storage, right? Now where the limitations come into play is how much of the model can be stored in your graphics, your GPU RAM. So for example, the box that I have, the production box that I have is running. So I'm running an i9, 128 gigs of RAM, SD RAM or whatever it is. And then it's running a NVIDIA RTX 4070 12 gigs of graphics RAM. It runs everything up to about the 13 to 14B models like a champ. As soon as it gets to the 70B, it starts to really slow down and the performance isn't usable, but it still loads it, right? So you have to think about if you're using non-quantized models, it has to have a GPU with enough RAM to load the entire model. If you're using quantized models, then it could offload some of that to the CPU and to the your regular SD RAM. Okay, So, for example, the 7dB model would expand to need about 128 gigs of RAM, either graphics or regular.
So then it might be worth it, since there's not a whole lot of disk space, it might be worth it if you're not using it all the time to load a model onto like ACC volume and then just launch a GPU.
No, it doesn't work that way. It's not the performance optimization is really terrible. It needs to be loaded into look either you using GPUs are much more efficient for large language models than using CPUs or regular RAM, right? There's a noticeable performance slowdown, and it's not worth trying to, like, even quantized models, right? I've noticed trying to use the GPU for most of it and offload the rest on NVRAM. The performance is drastic. The trade-off is drastic as opposed to just being able to keep it all into the GPU and the GRAM. You know what? I think. Yeah, I got it.
But we got another one starting in 5 minutes.
Oh.
And I appreciate Clint. You're an officer and a gentleman.
Don't insult me.
And I wish we had more time. We could take this for an hour and a half.
I told everybody I'm happy to talk about this anytime.